IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Wednesday, and that means it's time for a midweek rundown. Got some topics that I find interesting today that I want to talk about, and I'm hoping that you guys are interested in them too. We're going to start the show off, as we always do. We're going to look at the matchups between Notre Dame and Wake Forest. We'll dive into, all three phases for both sides of the ball, and then really focus on one that I think is the really impact matchup for me that I think is going to have an impact on not just the game, but more so on, what we're going to learn about Notre Dame and how they're going to finish and what they're going to do moving forward. So we'll talk about that as well. Second section of today's show, instead of doing like kind of who needs to step up type of thing, Notre Dame should beat Wake Forest, right? So I'm not gonna get into who's got to step up to win this game. I want to focus on something a little bit different today, and I'm going to talk about the Notre Dame pass game and things that I want to see from the Notre Dame pass game down the stretch that are going to tell us if it's just status quo to finish out, or if they're really working on trying to find fixes. And what my suggestion would be, because as I've always said, I don't want to be that site and that network and that company that just complains all the time. Complain, but never actually offer solutions. And, to me, with my background, I think that we can offer solutions, or what we think should happen, or what could work, or what would work, and those type of things. And so we're going to talk about that in section 2 today. And then section 3, let's talk about the portal, because we're getting ready to get into that season where every kid that jumps into the portal is going to be someone I'm going to have to answer for. Someone's going to put a tweet out about how they're looking at this guy and that guy and this other guy, when in reality, 90+% of those guys are not actual targets for Notre Dame. And it's just either clickbait or someone just making something up. And I'm not talking about people that cover the team per se. I'm talking about just fans, national people, and some recruits and some of these players are going to use Notre Dame to gain leverage, where Notre Dame may not actually be talking to them, but they're going to say, hey, no, I'm talking to Notre Dame. So we'll dive into that, and then we'll talk about what is a realistic expectation for Notre Dame fans to have going into the portal, and where I think Notre Dame should be looking to go in the portal, and what their needs should be, and what their focus should be, and where they shouldn't, and why this portal class is not going to be nearly as big as Notre Dame fans think it's going to be. So we'll dive into that as well. There will be no mailbag today. If you have a question that you definitely want to get answered, shoot me a super chat, and I'll get to that here at the end of the show. Or if it's kind of relevant during the section that I'm discussing, I'll bring it up and address it during that part of the show. And then in between each section, just to give you guys a heads up, I will do sort of like that little Notre Dame rundown, or Irish breakdown, music, just because I'm still kind of coming back from that sickness that I had last week, and so my voice is, it has a breaking point, and it needs a little bit more breaks than it did before, and then also to get some of the other the things we have set up going for those different sections. It'll only be about a minute, and so don't take off in between those sections. I promise you, got some really good stuff coming up. I want to kick off today's show, however, with looking at the matchups that matter. And I want to dive into this Notre Dame Wake Forest game and in a similar fashion to what we always do. And so we're gonna kind of look at these matchups here between Notre Dame and Wake Forest, and we'll dive into man, oh man, oh man. Let me see here. Of course, now StreamYard doesn't want to work today. And so, all right, that's wonderful. So it looks like StreamYard wants to be a pain in my butt again today. So yeah, looks like these are not gonna pull up. Give me just 1 second, and I'm gonna have to deal with this BS again, and we'll try to get it going. Just give me 1 second. Let me see if this will work. This is really ticking me off. All right, so that's not gonna work. Let's try this. Give me 1 second. Okay, that didn't work. You try it this way. Let's see if that works. There we go. All right, so I tell you what, boy. Yeah, Brandon, I'm going to be looking into alternatives to StreamYard in the very near future. Trust me, they're just a lot more expensive, but it's worth it because I'm about to go off here in a second. So let's get into this here real quick and dive into these matchups. And we're going to begin with a look up at the matchup between the Notre Dame offense and the Wake Forest defense. This is an interesting matchup for me because Wake Forest actually does have an okay defense this year. They are very similar to Pitt in my view, where they're coached well. I think Pitt has a little bit more talent up front in the interior. At linebacker, Wake Forest is to me a little better corner. Or Pitt's a little better at safety. Wake's better probably on the edges in my view, but they're very similar. Their numbers are similar. Their points, yards per game are very similar. Their strengths are similar and their weaknesses are similar. And obviously, Notre Dame performed very well against Pitt outside of turnovers, which they'll have to avoid. But Pitt's a little bit better at forcing turnovers than Notre Dame. But this matchup is going to really tell us how Notre Dame is going to finish the season. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, right? I mean, we all can agree on that this matchup is going to tell us, okay, is Notre Dame going to finish strong or not? I think we all have been pleased with what the defense has done this year to some degree, right? Whether you love what the defense has done or you just like what they've done, you respect what they've done, you think it's the greatest defense we've seen in however many years, to some degree, we're all kind of excited about what the defense has done or pleased with what the defense has done this year. And so when you look at what the offense has done, that's really been the disappointment, right? That was the issue in the Ohio State game. That was the issue in the Louisville game. That was the issue in the Clemson game, was the Notre Dame offense. And Wake is not going to present the kind of matchup to them that's going to tell us if the offense has turned the corner per se, because it's not a great defense by any stretch. It's a solid defense at best. And Notre Dame has done well, but it's more so about, can they really thrive in certain areas? And I think that's going to be the key in this particular matchup. So to begin, just looking at the numbers overall, Notre Dame obviously ranks 16th in the nation in scoring offense. They rank 11th in yards per play, both very good numbers. 37th in red zone offense, 21st in red zone touchdown rate, 25th in big plays. Now, those are all very good numbers, and they show that this offense, when they are good, when they are on, can be very good, can be very dynamic. And we've seen a bit of this hit or miss nature with the offense this season, and that's been one of the frustrating things. Sorry, everybody. Give me 1 second. I'm here with Rita alone, and she's having an issue. Just give me 1 second. This is just going to be one of those days. So bear with me, everybody. So looking at this, people say it in the chat. I mean, it's Jekyll and Hyde with Notre Dame. It's not, to me, I don't know if it's road versus home as much. I think that's how it looks. But the more I dive into it, I think it's more of good defense versus not very good defense, because Notre Dame's defense plays well home and away. Notre Dame's offense did not play well against Ohio State. They didn't play as poorly as they did in other places, but I think it has more to do with the fact that what does Duke, Louisville, and Clemson all have in common? They're all really good on defense. Why did NC State is pretty good on defense, but at the time, I don't think they were playing at the level that they have been lately. And so I think it comes down to to me, the Notre Dame offense has not played well against good defenses. Navy you can't get much further away from home than where they played Navy, and Notre Dame rolled. And so I'm beginning to think that it has more to do with that than necessarily home and away. When you look at last year, when Notre Dame played well on the road, they were against teams that didn't have really good defenses. North Carolina didn't have a very good defense. Syracuse didn't have a very good defense. The Notre Dame offense actually played well against USC outside of a couple turnovers, and just still move the ball. So I don't know if it's home and away as much as it's good defense versus not very good defense. And this year they've played some pretty good defenses and haven't stepped up. So it's not so much that the points that I see from Notre Dame this weekend are going to matter to me. It's not so much that, I want to see a bunch of yards or big plays. Those things are all fine. It's the why. It's the why we see that from this offense. And I think that's going to be something that to me is going to matter even more than, just the results, because Notre Dame could have good results and it not be any better. And when you look at the pass game, it tells a similar story. I mean, just on raw numbers, Notre Dame's pass game has been pretty good this year. They ranked 20th in yards per attempt, 18th in yards per completion, 31st in touchdowns. They ranked 21st in pass efficiency rating. They ranked 30th in fewest sacks allowed per game. That's on a per game basis. So there have been some really good things this season, but it's just been such a change. And I had an article today that kind of broke it down. And when you look at Sam Hartman's first 4 games of the season, he averaged 265.3 yards per game, completed 71.1% of his passes, and averaged 11.8 yards per attempt. He had 13 touchdowns and no picks in the first 4 games. In the last 6 games, however, he's only averaged 201.8 yards per game. He's only completing 58.3% of his passes, and he's averaging only 7.2 yards per attempt while throwing 5 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So the overall numbers look good, but they don't tell the story of what the pass game has been in recent weeks. And so to me, getting this part of the game going is going to be important. And we saw it get going a little bit against Pittsburgh, where they were able to make some big plays. And we saw Chris Tyree make a great catch, and we saw Tobias Merriweather get open for a big play. And, we saw some different things we liked. But then we also saw, Sam Hartman make some big mistakes in the pass game. The 2 interceptions were drive killers. I've heard people say, oh, the offense struggled against Pittsburgh. No, it didn't. The offense moved up and down the field the entire game against Pittsburgh. The problem was they got into the red zone or near the red zone twice, and Sam Hartman threw 2 picks. Once was a mistake from Rico Flores. Once was a mistake from Sam. And it was really those things that stalled the offense. It wasn't, play calling and all these other type of things that we like to kind of go to when trying to blame, find blame for why Notre Dame is having the issues that they're having. And to me, it's going to come down to doing a better job, in my opinion, from a game planning standpoint, which I'll get into here in a little bit. But then the execution's got to get better, which means the preparation has got to get better. That's what execution means to me. When a coach says that execution isn't good, I think more often than not, what I hear is we didn't do a good job in preparation in coming into the game to get them ready to execute at a high level. That's what it means to me, and that's what it should mean anyway. And so that still goes down to being a bit of a coaching issue, although at the end of the day, there are times when the players just got to make plays. And that's something that they're going to have to do a better job of as well. But the pass game numbers are not great. And this is the area of Wake Forest defense. It's been a problem for them. They rank 64th in yards allowed per game in the pass game. And that includes, if you actually look at it, that includes also the last couple games where they've really held teams in check in the last couple games for different reasons. That their pass defense this past week, they're coming off 2 games where they barely gave up 100 yards per game. Actually, they gave up less than 100 yards per game. Duke only passed for 86 yards against them in a loss for Wake Forest, and then North Carolina State only passed for 113 yards against them. And so that was more about a byproduct of the 2 teams they played than it was about Wake Forest pass defense being better. The 3 previous games against Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, and Florida State, they gave up over 300 passing yards in each game. And Virginia Tech and Florida State both went over 10 yards per attempt against them. Vanderbilt was over 8 per attempt. Old Dominion was over 8 per attempt. And Georgia Tech was over 8 per attempt. So when you study Wake Forest, you see that the numbers in the pass game aren't good. 64th in yards per game, 74th in yards per attempt, 83rd in yards per completion, 76th in pass efficiency defense, 124th in big plays allowed in the pass game. Those numbers are not very good, and they're even worse when you look at the fact that they had a couple games that kind of inflated their numbers, including playing Elon early in the year, an FCS team that they held to 147 yards. So this is a matchup that Notre Dame should thrive in. And to me, this is going to be a big part of telling me if this offense is able to find some answers, if this offensive coaching staff is able to find some answers. And there's 2 ways they can go about it. Well, one is just constantly complain about what you don't have or how young you are and all these other kind of things. And the other one is to say, let's find some solutions. And in part 2 of this show, we'll dive more into what those solutions are, because I do believe that there are some solutions that Notre Dame can find in the pass game. But the big one for me, the part of this matchup to me that is going to have the biggest impact on Notre Dame and tell me about who Notre Dame is is going to be the matchup of the Notre Dame run game against the Wake run defense. And I'm going to explain why this is the part that's going to be the most telling. You, I was having an email conversation with somebody today, and we're talking about the offensive line, and we're back to what we kind of always are with the offensive line. There's a group that thinks it plays really well. There's another group that doesn't think it plays pretty well. I found myself on opposite sides of this at different times. This season, I don't think the offensive line has played really well. When I look at this Notre Dame offensive line, I see a football team that hasn't run the ball for over 200 yards in a while. I think some of the numbers they have had in recent games are inflated. The Clemson game, they averaged 183 rushing yards. And when you look at it and you take away what their numbers were after the first quarter, it's not very good. You look at the fact that 64 of those yards were on basically quarterback scrambles. So pure run game, you're talking now being under 120 for the game against Clemson. You ran for only 155 against Pitt, only 125 against USC. Now, I know short fields, right, and all that, but only 4.3 yards per carry against Pitt. You only went for 44 against Louisville, 1.6 per carry. You went for 159 on Duke. Part of that was, again, a 17-yard quarterback scramble at the end of the game, and then a 30-yarder to put it away at the very end, and then 176 in Duke. They haven't gone for over 200 yards since the Central Michigan game. And Notre Dame this season, through 10 games, has only rushed for over 200 yards twice, and one of them was against an FCS team. When you look at last season through 10 games, Notre Dame had run for over 200 yards 5 times. And so there was still some of the up and downs last year that we've seen this year existed both years. But what we haven't seen is the ups for this year's offensive line have not been nearly as good. And I'm sorry. I know though we'll get all the excuses in the world, first year position coach and new guards and all that kind of stuff. But Notre Dame played with 2 starting brand new tackles last year. The center was new. He was stepping in. You had Jarrett Patterson was a returner, but he was playing a new position, and Josh Lugg was playing a new position. So, you saw last year, however, but the unit kind of got better as the season went on, and this group hasn't. Well, now you go into this last 2 games, you're not going to have Rocco Spindler. You may not have Zeke Correll, at least for this game. And so you say, okay, so what do? You just say, oh, well, guess we're not going to play well this game. Or do you say, hey, listen, let's really buckle down and let's really go out and thrive and play hard and play well and get this group ready to go. We see teams all around the country lose good players and say, hey, somebody else has got to step up. Georgia loses Brock Bowers and their offense starts to take off. Did they take off because Brock Bowers is no longer there? No. It took off because with Brock Bowers not out, other guys stepped up and said, hey, I got to raise my game. So, Pat Coogan's going to have to raise his game. If Zeke Correll's out there, he's got to raise his game up. Blake Fisher's got to raise his game up and help, Billy Schrauth kind of come along. And then Billy needs to kind of play well. So I'm actually excited to see, how Billy Schrauth does this weekend. If Ashton Craig's playing at center, I'm very excited to see what Ashton Craig is going to do this weekend. I think he's a player that has a chance to do something at Notre Dame. He's a guy that the Notre Dame staff loves. It's not just this staff with Joe Rudolph. I heard the same thing about Coach Easton. I heard Coach Easton was very high on Ashton Craig and really loved the potential that he brought to the table. And so we're seeing 2 years in a row now where there's been some very high expectations and a lot of hopes for Ashton Craig. I just don't know that he was necessarily ready yet to step into that role. And I don't know that right now I'm expecting him to play like gangbusters, because I do think he's probably a year away, meaning looking into 2024, a year away to be that guy that can step in and thrive. But as we saw against Clemson, I know Vince talked about this, and I think Ryan also talked about it. Sean talked about it, but they were correct. When he was thrust into the lineup late in the game, he battled. I wouldn't say that he necessarily played great, but he battled. And that's what you want to see. And you hope that Billy Schrauth will do the same thing with him stepping into the starting lineup, because this is an opportunity for both players, if they play, to set their mark on next season. This could go a long way towards some decision making that you have as a staff, as far as who you're going to invite back next year, who you're going to want back next year, based on how these guys play, or what position battles are going to truly rage this offseason or not. And so this part of the game is important, but also, we talked yesterday about how I want to see this Notre Dame team just come out and be physical and play hard to compete. And if they're going to do that, then this is an area where you're going to see that come about. Wake Forest is not a great rush defense. They've had some decent moments this season, and they've had, they're a team that likes to create a lot of disruptives, as you can see. They're 31st in tackles for loss allowed. They're coming off a game in which they gave up 266 yards to NC State. They gave up 181 to Duke, but the three previous games, they held their opponents to 141 or below. Held Florida State to only 126. They did give up 207 to Clemson. So they've had some moments where their run defense has been pretty good. They're undersized. They're going to run a lot of run stunts. They're going to pressure a lot. They're going to do things um, to get their undersized, decent athlete front seven players in position to be aggressive and attack. And that's what Notre Dame is going to have to be prepared for. So when I think about my feelings on how Notre Dame is going to be going into the going into the bowl season, and how my feelings are going to be about what this team is and what this team can be. And we talked about it on Tuesday. This team has a chance to still create some positive momentum with people who are rational. Right now, positive momentum doesn't mean you're okay with how the season went, but it means, okay, I don't like how the season went, but you know what? They finished strong. And right now, that's all this football team can control is how they finish, the momentum. They can't go back and change the Clemson game. They can't go back and change the Louisville game. They can't go back and change the Ohio State game. They can say, okay, we're going to finish strong. We're going to do some things in these last couple games that are going to give us an opportunity to go out there and play at a very high level and finish the season on a strong note. And that's what I want to see. And part of that's going to be a more physical football team. I can live with some mistakes this weekend if we see Billy Strouth and Ashton Craig. I really can. What I don't want to see is where they're just not the most physical team on the field. I want to see them push Wake Forest around. I want to see them be bullies again. And we haven't seen this offensive line be bullies in a long time. And that's something that I want to see. So, even if they pass for a bunch of yards, that's great. I'm going to like that. I'm going to talk about some things I'd love to see. But to me, this area right here and the Wake Forest game to me also is important because I don't know how much we're going to learn about Notre Dame against Stanford. Stanford's a really bad football team, and they're just really not good. And they're coming off a game where Oregon State ran all over them, UCLA ran all over them, Oregon ran all over them, USC ran all over them. They're just a really bad defensive football team. They're giving up 36.9 points per game. They're giving up 456 yards per game. I don't know Notre Dame going out and ripping up Stanford or pushing Stanford around is going to really tell us a whole lot. It's kind of like if they were playing in a Central Michigan or a Tennessee State at the end of the year. I think Wake Forest presents a not that they're a great defense. And again, the numbers right here tell you that they're not a great defense. They rank 62nd in rushing yards per game, 74th in rushing yards allowed per attempt. But they battle. That's the thing. They battle. And for Notre Dame to have the success they need to have, they're going to have to battle and play well. I've seen Wake Forest play well against teams who run the football. I've seen them step up. I saw them battle Florida State and shut Florida State down. They geared a lot of their run game towards stopping a lot of their game plan towards stopping the Florida State run game. And they did a pretty good job of that. Now, that opened up some other opportunities for Florida State to have some big plays in the pass game, but they did a pretty good job of keeping their run game in check. And they did a pretty good job of that against Virginia Tech. They did a pretty good job of that against Old Dominion and Vanderbilt. So I've seen them have success stopping the run. And so that's why I think this part of it's going to be the most telling. It's going to be the most telling thing. And for me, if this team is who we need it to be and who we want it to be and who we think it can be, they bounce back from what happened to them and they come out with a little bit more fire and physicality. That's what good teams do, right? And if Notre Dame is that team, then they're going to come out in this matchup and they're going to thrive. And that's what I want to see from this team. And that's why this run game stuff is so important to me and it's not even about numbers, it's about how they play. And that's the biggest thing for me when I look at the matchup between the Notre Dame offense and the Wake Forest defense. Now, let's look at the matchup between the Notre Dame defense and the Wake Forest offense. This is by far the bigger mismatch in this game. And Notre Dame's defense has really played well all season, and they've played well against some very good offensive football teams. I was having this conversation with Bill Bender last night, and the case that I made to him was that I believe Notre Dame's defense is better than Michigan's. Now, Michigan's is better in certain statistical areas and scoring off defense and things like that. But when you look about who Notre Dame came out against, or who Notre Dame has performed against, they've performed against some very good offensive football teams. USC is not a very good team, but they're a great offensive football team that can score a lot of points. Ohio State's a good football team with a good offense, not a great offense, but a good offense. Louisville scores a bunch of points, and Notre Dame has gone out and really performed well in each of those instances. And they shut Duke down before Duke really had their injury issues. And so this part of the team has just been excellent all year. They rank 11th in scoring offense or scoring defense. They rank 7th in total defense, 9th in fewest yards per play, 5th in red zone defense overall, 5th in red zone defense from a touchdown standpoint. They're 13th in fewest big plays allowed, and they rank 5th in turnovers. Now, that 5th in turnovers means a lot more now than it did in past weeks because Notre Dame always had at least one more game on most people. Well, when it comes to now, that Notre Dame's on track now with everybody because Notre Dame's already had their second bye. And so the defense just overall has been really outstanding this season. And Wake Forest, as you can see in the numbers, is offense is just falling off a cliff. They lost Sam Hartman. Obviously, that was huge for them. They lost A.T. Perry. That was huge for them. Donovan Green got hurt at the beginning of the year. Their offensive line's been a problem. And so when you look at it, it's a really rough group. Rank 112th in scoring offense, 103rd in yards per game, 120th in yards per play, 114th in third down offense, 88th in red zone defense, 129th in red zone touchdowns, 119th in big plays, and 120th in turnovers. So what it is, they don't move the ball very well. They don't create big plays, and they turn it over a lot. That should be a recipe for success for Notre Dame. And with what we've seen from the Notre Dame defense. So as long as the Notre Dame defense is focused, this is a part of it that they should be able to control this matchup. And this is why you look at it and you just feel that against teams like this, Notre Dame has been less upset proof than past seasons. Somebody's complaining about, Stanford's bad last year. Okay, this is a different team than last year. This Notre Dame team that has lost to good teams this season, and against every not good team they've played, and Wake Forest is a not good team, they've dominated. They beat Navy by 39. They beat Tennessee State by 53. They beat NC State, who's actually a good team, by 21. They beat Central Michigan by 24 in a game that wasn't that close. They beat USC by 28. They're a solid team. They beat Pitt by 51. Against teams like this, Notre Dame is dominated. Where Notre Dame has struggled is against the majority of the good teams on their schedule. I think they've played 5 what I would call sort of big games this year against what I believe to be good football teams. And in the way, by my count, Notre Dame is 2-3 in those games, right? NC State, Ohio State, Duke, Louisville. Actually, I'd say, hold on, they're 3-3. USC and Clemson. Those are the 6 teams that I view as the good teams on the schedule, and Notre Dame's 3-3 in those games. And they've blown 2 of those teams out. The teams that aren't good, like Wake, who's not good, who's lost 6 of 7, Notre Dame is dominated. And so that's an area where we have seen growth from next year, but they need to make sure that continues in this game. And what could hurt Notre Dame is if they'd come into this game not focused and not locked in and kind of looking at the season as kind of being over. The New Year's Six is not an option anymore. We're 7-3. We're going to play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl or the ReliaQuest Bowl or something like that. And guys check out. Guys aren't as locked in on defense. That's how you can allow Wake Forest to make more plays, to move the ball, to get some big plays in instances where they shouldn't. And now you put yourselves in a tougher situation. If the Notre Dame defense comes out and just does what they've done all year, this is a game that ultimately Notre Dame will win. The question is going to be, how convincing will the win be? And that, to me, is going to have more to do with the offense than it will with the defense. And that's something that we're going to have to find out here as we move into into this matchup and look at what Wake Forest is. And we'll talk about the pass game a little bit. This is the part of the offense that's really just fallen off a cliff for Wake Forest without Sam Hartman. And they've had some injuries at quarterback against Pitt. They ended up playing their third string quarterback in that game. I think his name's Santino Martucci. And you look at Wake, they're 96th in the country in passing yards. They're 65th in yards per attempt, 54th in yards per completion, 106th in touchdown passes, 94th with most interceptions. They've thrown 11 touchdowns, and they've thrown 10 interceptions this season, which is just really just not good. And they rank 80th in completion percentage and 87th in pass efficiency. When you look at what Wake Forest was last year, they ranked 9th in total passing yards per game. They ranked 12th in yards per attempt. They ranked 10th in passer rating last season with Sam Hartman, a quarterback. It has absolutely fallen off a cliff. And part of it is the quarterback play. Part of it is losing A.T. Perry and Donovan Green. And part of it is their offensive line has been even worse than it was a year ago. Wake has always been a team that gave up a lot of sacks because of the type of the mesh stuff that they do. You're always going to have a little bit more, just a little bit more. You're just going to get more hits on the quarterback. That's just basically the way that it goes. But it's been worse, much worse this year. And that's going to factor into it. However, here's the interesting thing. And you look at Notre Dame's pass defense, it's one of the best in college football. And this is despite playing, USC, who's got a top pass offense. Louisville's got I think, a top 30 pass offense. They've played some good pass offenses, some good receiving cores this year. And Notre Dame still ranks third in total, fewest passing yards allowed, fifth in fewest yards per attempt, fourth in fewest touchdowns, fourth in most interceptions, fourth in lowest completion percentage, third in pass efficiency defense, sixth when it comes to fewest big plays allowed. They haven't got after the quarterback very well. That's obviously been an issue, but it's been in the dominant pass defense. But here's the interesting thing about this matchup against Wake Forest, and to me, that is that this is still a dangerous football team from a pass game standpoint beyond the numbers. And here's what I mean by that. At the end of the day, their pass game's not very good right now because their quarterback play has not been very good. Their offensive line has been a mess. Okay? That's why it's struggled. That's why they haven't been good at what they do. But they still have Jamal Banks, who's a talented football player. They still have Taylor Marin, who's a talented football player. And they still have Keyshawn Williams, who's a talented football player. So the injuries to those other players and losing A.T. Perry hurts. But last year, Jamal Banks was a 42-catch, 636-yard guy with 9 touchdowns. Last year, Taylor Marin was 47 catches, 575 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Keyshawn Williams last year had 39 catches for 553 yards last year and a touchdown. So those kids have a lot of production. And even though they lost Donovan Green and even though they lost A.T. Perry, who was a star, these guys have seen their production dip. They didn't stop being talented players. The issue is more about the quarterback problems and the offensive line problems. So number one, Notre Dame's going to have to get after the quarterback. That's not been a strength of Notre Dame's this season. At least it hasn't consistently. There's been times when the pass rush has been good. And the sacks only tell part of the story. Notre Dame ranks 76th in sacks. But there have been times when they've gotten 2-3 sacks in a game, which isn't a lot. And they still had a very good pass rush because they were disruptive. And that's the key. You have to be disruptive. Whether you get 2 sacks or 8 sacks, you have to be disruptive and force the timing to be off. You can't let the quarterback get comfortable in the pocket. And that's going to be a big, big key in this football game because if the quarterback gets comfortable and the quarterback gets time to throw, they do have weapons that can hurt you. Now, you'd think that Notre Dame's corners are good enough to kind of shut down the outside guys, and that's true. But there are some different things that Wake does schematically and matchup-wise and moving guys around that can create some matchups that make it less favorable. And so Notre Dame's going to have to be prepared for that. And it's going to be a big part of what Notre Dame does. If they can shut down the pass game, which they should, then Wake really has no chance. And that kind of leads me to the next part of this breakdown. And to me, that's what, it's going to make it the biggest part of this breakdown. And that's the Wake Forest rush offense against the Notre Dame rush defense. Now, Wake's rushing game is not good on the season. I know some of the folks at IB have talked about how it's better and all those type of things. And statistically, it's not better, but it is better. I think it is better. I think last year, part of the lack of success was because they didn't run it to me, overly effectively, to be honest with you. Last year, the yards per carry from all the backs is higher than it was last year. The problem is the offensive line's not real good. But they have had their moments. 288 yards against Vanderbilt, 224 against Georgia Tech, 172 against Pitt. 159 even recently against Duke. That's I would argue that they ran the ball every bit as good, if not better, against Duke than Notre Dame did. Notre Dame had some big chunk plays at the end to help them to get more overall yards, but I don't think Notre Dame ran the ball all that well against them. So they have had their moments, and Notre Dame has, let's be honest, has had their moments where they haven't been a great rush defense. If we're going to be completely honest about it, we've got to be able to look at that and say, Notre Dame, if there is an Achilles heel to this defense, it's this right here. It's the rush defense. And we saw this against Clemson last week, where they really struggled stopping the run. And they didn't give up. They gave up the one big play, and then it was just grinding it out throughout the game. They gave up 185 rushing yards to Louisville, 189 to Duke. And you can't allow that to happen. And this is the matchup to me that's going to have the biggest impact in this game, because if you shut down the run game, Wake Forest really has no chance. They are really going to struggle. And if you look at the few times that the Wake offense has been solid, in my opinion, it's been able to run the football. Their best output of the season this year so far, Vanderbilt, they had 484 yards. They ran the football. They ran for 288 in that game. You look at a couple weeks later against Georgia Tech, where the offense had 400 yards and had their third or fourth best yards per play of the season. They've had 224 rushing yards. You look at the Pitt game where they won that game. They were over 5 yards per play for only one of 4 times this entire season. What helped them? They were able to run the football. They had a really tough matchup against Duke, had 400 yards of offense, 6.1 yards per play, which is their third best output of the season. They ran for 159 yards in that game, which allowed them to have enough balance to then go make some plays in the pass game. And so they were able to throw for 241 yards that game. Last week against NC State, pass game couldn't do anything. Why? Because they couldn't run the football. They only had 7 rushing yards. Virginia Tech, they couldn't do anything on offense. They only had 262 yards of offense that game. Why? They couldn't run the football. And so that's going to be a really big key to this for Notre Dame, is to be able to go out and shut down the run game. Because what does it mean to shut down the run game? It's obviously you're controlling the line of scrimmage, you're getting penetration, you're being aggressive, you're being gap sound, you're getting off the ball, you're getting penetration. Well, if you're doing those things, you're going to also get pressure on the quarterback. But at the same time, you're also going to put Wake in some really tough third down situations. And Wake is not a team that wants to be in a lot of third down situations. And so that's why I think this part of the matchup is really the key, even though the pass game scares me the most because of the talent at receiver. If Notre Dame's not locked in, they might be able to make some plays. But that only happens if the run game comes out and gets going. If they're able to establish something in the ground game, get some big chunk runs early, that could force Notre Dame into some bad habits and some tough situations that then open up the opportunities in the pass game. So as I said, even though the pass game scares me the most, as far as it's the most dangerous part, the pass game can't get going without the run game. And that's been true for Wake Forest all season. So that's why I think that's the biggest part of this matchup for me. So that is the matchup breakdown between Notre Dame and Wake Forest. I'm not going to spin this to you guys. I'm not going to try to tell you that, Wake Forest is a much better team than their record shows at 4-6. They're really not. They're about a 4-6 football team. But they compete and they're well coached. They just lack some players. And so that's why it's important that Notre Dame does come out locked in, because Wake is not going to just go away. And when you look at some of their losses this year, yeah, they've had some blowout losses. Florida State beat them convincingly. It was 41-16, but it was like 34-10 at halftime. I mean, it was never a competitive game. They got blown out by Virginia Tech, but a lot of the other games they've played this season have been very competitive football games. And Clemson, they lost at Clemson 17-12. I mean, they had a closer loss to Clemson than Notre Dame did. You look at the Duke game at Duke recently, in November, they only lost by 3 points in a game where Wake actually moved the ball early, and Wake went out and had success. And really actually had a lead on Duke. Duke had to come back, and it was a back and forth game. I mean, they played really hard in that game. They just don't have the horses to go out and win it. So they're going to come out and play hard in this game. They're going to have the emotional motivation of facing Sam Hartman, who left and went to Notre Dame. And, they're going to try to ruin his senior day and Notre Dame's senior day and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to get a Wake Forest team that's going to come in and play hard. They're not going to be afraid of Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's going to have to play hard, match that intensity, and then execute. And if they do, this should be a convincing win. And when you look at Notre Dame in recent years on Senior Day, Senior Day's been good to Notre Dame in recent years. I know there was a time, I know early in Coach Kelly's tenure where Senior Day was a problem. I mean, they had some rough senior days. Obviously, his first one was pretty good, but then you go down the rest of the year. 2011, they barely beat Boston College. 2012, they had a good win over Wake Forest. 2013 on Senior Day, a sloppy win over BYU. 2014 on Senior Day, they lost to Louisville. 2015 on Senior Day, had a really sloppy win over Wake Forest again. 2016 Senior Day, they lost to Virginia Tech. 2017 Senior Day, they barely beat Navy. Kind of started to turn around in 2018. They blew Florida State out on Senior Day in 2018. 2019, they blew out Boston College 40-7. 2020 Senior Day, they beat Syracuse 45-21. It was sloppy, but it was dominant. 2021, they beat Georgia Tech 55-0 on Senior Day, and then last year they beat Boston College 44-0 on Senior Day. So the last two Senior Days, they've outscored their opponents 99-0. Obviously, one was from Coach Kelly, one was from Coach Freeman. So you want to hope that continues. You've got an opponent that it should continue against, if we're being honest. And so we're going to have to see if Notre Dame can come out and have the necessary focus to do it, to handle business. And that's going to really what it comes down to. And I think those matchups are going to be an important part of that. Next, we're going to move on to the pass game next. Before we're going to just take a little 1-minute intermission. So don't go anywhere. Please stick with me. I just need to get some charts prepped and some things prepped and my notes prepped and get some liquid in me to help me make it through the next section. So I'm going to play the theme music here for Irish Breakdown for about a minute, and then I'll be right back to dive into it. While I'm waiting, in a minute, I promise you can hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and sign up in about a minute. I promise you can get it done in a minute. So I'll be back very soon here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. All right, we are back for part 2 of today's Notre Dame midweek rundown. And today I want to talk a little something different. Normally in this space, we talk about guys that need to step up for Notre Dame, coaches and players that need to step up for Notre Dame. And I want to do something a little different today. I want to talk about the Notre Dame pass game. And we know about all the issues from the pass game. We've talked about them a lot. And Sam Hartman's problems, coaching problems, scheme problems, receiver coaching problems, receiver focus problems, O-line problems at times, although that's the one area where the offensive line has gotten better in recent games. They've gotten better in pass pro in recent weeks, although there were certainly some issues against Louisville. There was issues against Duke, certainly, and then late against Ohio State. But in recent games, I think the pass protection has gotten a lot better in recent games. So I will give them credit for that. But there's been a lot of issues, injuries. We can make all the excuses in the world, but at the end of the day, you know who you are, you know the players you have, and you can either say, "Hey, we're just going to keep making excuses and keep blaming why we did this and why we've done that and all these other problems," and or you can say, "Hey, let's find some solutions." And there are solutions to be had, in my opinion, with this pass offense, and that's been one of my frustrations is they really haven't gone to the solutions and done the things necessary. And I've heard some things from the coaches that make sense, and I've heard some things from the coaches that don't make sense. Coach Parker talking last night about you don't do man, you didn't run a lot of play action pass against Clemson because they were man coverage. And if I'm covering you, I'm covering you. And I understand that to a degree, and that may make sense to some, but that doesn't make sense to me. And the reason it doesn't make sense to me is because a play action pass isn't always about influencing the man coverage guys. It's also about, with certain concepts, you can run off play action. You can run, sail concepts. You can run over concepts. You can run double post concepts where maybe you're not influencing the guys in coverage, but what you are influencing is the linebacker depth. You can be potentially influence the safety depth chart. They did run one play action pass and you had three guys wide open. It's like, hey, on a bootleg, because on some of the play action stuff where you run some of your bootlegs and things like that, yeah, you're in man coverage, but if they see run action as hard as they were playing the run, they're going to fly downhill and you can get guys coming open, which they did against Clemson on the pass to Holden Stace. Well, on that particular pass play, you not only hold Holden Stace open, yet Eli Raridan open and Enrico Flores open. And if Clemson's not in a corner fire, he would have probably covered Holden Stace or jumped Eli Raridan, and then you would have had Holden Stace and Rico Flores open, or maybe he takes Holden Stace, and then you've got Eli Raridan open for what would have been an easy walk-in touchdown. So to me, there are things you can do in play action pass and movement stuff to get that going. So it just was one of the things where it's like sometimes you hear things from the coaches and you're just like, do they really believe that? Like, is that really what they think? Or is that just kind of, they're just giving an answer to give us something to write, which is fine. But I hope that that's not necessarily how they feel. And that's just Coach Parker kind of deflecting a little bit in order not to throw somebody under the bus or something. I don't know, because it just didn't make a lot of sense. But the point is, there are things that can be done to improve this pass offense. And so I did an article today at irishbreakdown.com. I'm going to dive into a little bit now. That's going to talk about 5 things that I believe I want that the pass offense that the coaches can do, the players can do, that will do really 2 things. One is potentially jumpstart the pass offense, and number 2, tell us something about who this team is. And because right now there are portal decisions that need to be made. There are transfer decisions that needs to be made. There are depth chart decisions that need to be made in the offseason moving into next year. And I don't think you have really done what you need to do to find out who you have. And I know that for some fans, it's super easy to just say, this guy stinks as a sophomore. That guy stinks as a sophomore. Let's write this guy off. Like Tobias Merriweather is the new favorite whipping boy of Notre Dame fans for some weird reason. And you say, oh, he's done. He's done. Well, he has more career catches right now than Miles Boykin had through his first 2 years. Matter of fact, he's kind of close to having as many catches in his first 2 years as Miles Boykin had his first 3. If he can catch 6 balls in the next 3 games, that's 2 a game. He's going to have as many catches in 2 years as Miles Boykin had in 3. And people had written off Miles Boykin, and Miles Boykin ended up being a good player. Guys develop at different times, but you need to really push the envelope as the Notre Dame coaching staff to find out who you have and what you have. Because if guys don't step up, then you need to know, you need to make some decisions. And so that's part of what it is as well. So let's dive into these. Number 1, more movement. Notre Dame has become a very static offense, and this is something that I've complained about in the past. It's a situation where you look at, they don't go tempo, just fine. I don't think tempo is the end all be all. I can live with them not going tempo. I can live with that. Number 2, they don't really do a whole lot of movement pre-snap, and they don't do enough post-snap movement to really put teams in binds. And what you do if you don't go tempo and you're relatively static, And all you really do is just like, some jets across and some half motions, and your tight ends just do certain things to get in blocking motion. It's all very elementary, rudimentary stuff that doesn't really put the defense in a bind. It doesn't really make the secondary have to make any quick decisions. And when you watch college football, you'll see teams that'll do motions and shifts and things like that, and then do along that like post snap movement, post snap switches, and different things, and it can really put defenses in binds. And the reality is 8 out of 10 times the defense is going to have it figured out and know who's covering who. But the 2 out of 10 times that they don't, somebody's coming open. And that's why it's good to do those things. It's not do it once, and if it doesn't work, you don't go back to it again. It's got to be a part of who you are. If you're going to be a team that does not push the tempo, which is who Notre Dame is, Marcus Freeman seems very allergic to tempo at this point in time. And to a degree, I understand it. I don't know that Notre Dame right now has the personnel to be a tempo team, even if they wanted to be. I believe that there are times within games that you mix up tempos. Andy Ludwig, for example, is someone who does this incredibly well, where he'll mix up tempos and do different things. But you're always kind of poking and prodding and doing different things to try to see how are they going to handle this, because if they start handling it this way, then I've got something to come back to. That's all part of play calling and doing those different things. And so here's some examples. And this is why I brought up David Shaw yesterday. You want to be a 12 personnel team, line up like this. You've got twins to the right, 2 tight ends to the left. That, pre-snap, you shift the tight ends over, then you motion one across. You've just done something that kind of changed the leverage, move a guy across, balance the leverage. You've now forced them into some decisions on how they're going to line up in the run game. Put 2 over, have a receiver jet across. There's different things that you can do. You can motion a receiver across, then shift your 2 tight ends, and you just went from 3-by-1 to one side, or 2-by-2 to 3-by-1 on the opposite side of what people thought you were going to do. You went from 3-by-1 to one side to 3-by-1 to the other side. There's all types of things that you can do that are going to give the quarterback a feel on what the defense is doing, that are going to force the defenses to communicate and make checks and adjustments. There's going to be things that you can do, in my opinion, out of like 21 personnel, for example, that could get really interesting to make teams have to make decisions with Jeremiah Love, Jadari Price, lining up outside, doing jet motions, lining up in the backfield, doing things where, let's say you're in 21 personnel, right? So you've got 2 receivers, a tight end, 2 backs. So you line up on a particular play and you go 2-by-2, right? So you have tight end and a receiver on one side, Jeremiah Love and a receiver on the other side, and you got Audric Estime in the backfield. And you do something where you are, you can have that 2-by-2. You can motion Jeremiah Love across. All of a sudden you're in a 3-by-1. You can motion him across 3-by-1 and run a run action. And all of a sudden Jeremiah Love kind of does like a swing pass on the backside. He can do like a reverse action. You can run him on crossers. You can run him on seams. You can run him on arrow routes. You can do things where he starts in the backfield and motions out, starts out, motions back. I mean, there's all types of things that you can do. And like I said, 8 out of 10 times, it's not going to be something that's deadly to the defense. But the 2 out of those 10 times that you do, they've turned Jeremiah Love loose, or they're so over-focused on Jeremiah Love that they let Chris Tyree sneak through, or Jordan Faison sneak through over the top, or they don't help out on a certain coverage, and now all of a sudden, Jaden Greathouse or Rico Flores or Tobias are running a post route. They think their safety help. They're worried about the real route. The safety's worried about this, and all of a sudden, boom, a guy's turned loose. You ever wonder why you watch college football and there's always these games where you're like, how are they getting these guys wide open? It's because they do a lot of things like this, because they do pre-snap movement. They'll have a guy in motion, and then at the snap, cross them. They'll do post-snap switches, things along those lines where, guy comes in motion, outside guy runs up the seam, outside guy goes like this. Sometimes they're going to cover it rel. Sometimes they're going to turn. 2 guys are going to run with a guy and turn a guy loose. But when you don't do those things, when you're very static, when all you do is mesh concepts and 4 verts, basically teams are going to be able to like, okay, we got this. We know what's coming. And teams just kind of sit on it. So to me, doing more things from a movement standpoint, pre-snap, out of 11 personnel, out of 12 personnel, out of 21 personnel, all of it, doing things that more things out of that, so you're just not so static and just stationary, which gives the defense a lot of time to get their calls made, to get everybody lined up appropriately. They can then start playing their games. They can walk up and they can walk back and they can shift their D-line and they can move their D-line back because they know there's still 19 seconds left on the play clock. Notre Dame's just now breaking the huddle. We can line up and we've got plenty of time start playing mind games with Sam Hartman right now. But it's harder to play mind games with Sam Hartman when Jared Parker's playing mind games with your defensive coordinator. And those are things that I want to see more of, because again, they may only result in 3 or 4 mistakes by the defense, but those 3 or 4 mistakes, if you execute them correctly, are going to make for about 150 plus yards of offense. And then you start getting into situations where you start using these things to better get leverage in the run game. There's that aspect of it too. So it's not just about the pass game; it's about getting numbers or leverage in the run game. And those are different things that I want to see Notre Dame do a better job of, in my opinion. And you'll like, we saw that from Clemson last week, where they went in motion across. Notre Dame brought their backside safety down and blitzed them off the edge. So Clemson said, okay, we see that. So they came back to, I think, a series later, they went motion across. DJ Brown came down, blitzed off the edge. They ran inside zone away, and that guy cut right back inside off the tackle underneath DJ Brown's edge pressure and went for a touchdown, 41-yard touchdown. Using motion to manipulate the defense into doing what you want to do and then having answers for it. That's play calling. That's play calling. That's the chess match that is being an offensive coordinator. And I just want to see more of that from Notre Dame. So if you don't want to push the tempo, fine. Totally cool with that. Totally understand that. If I was the offensive coordinator Notre Dame, I wouldn't be a huge tempo guy either. I have always said I want to have the ability to do it to keep teams either A, to keep defenses sort of off balance. You don't know what's coming. Or B, I think my offense needs a spark. We need to be able to go. It's something you practice every week. Even if you're not a tempo team, it's called the 2-minute drill. So you have mechanisms to speed the game up whenever you need to. You don't always have to wait till the last 2 minutes to do that. And so if you're not going to do that, that's cool. Totally fine with that. But you then can't be static pre-snap. You've got to be one or the other. And that's what I want to see. That's number one of what I want to see from Notre Dame offense when you start looking at what the pass game can do to get better and better and better. Number 2 is be more aggressive. We've talked about this a lot, right? Watch the film. Opposing teams are just sitting on watching Notre Dame to attack, right? And just say, hey, come off the line, run your mesh routes, run your quick game, or run your 4 verts, and we're gonna be all over you, and we're just gonna play your guys. Okay. And when you look at it, you say, you've got to do things to get them out of what they're doing. So Clemson comes out last week and they're just playing cover 1. Okay, great. That's not normally what Clemson does. Well, you've got to have answers. You don't just say, well, crap, they're playing cover 1. Well, I guess we're screwed. We're going to have to try to find a way to figure out the ball. No. Do more movement pre-snap. Do more movement post-snap. Be willing to be more aggressive. If you hit a couple shots, then you're going to have those opportunities, right? You're going to have those opportunities to back them off and say, hey, you better be careful doing this. Now, part of that, honestly, is just the quarterback throwing the ball. And there were at least 3 opportunities last week where guys had a step or were open down the field and the quarterback just didn't throw the football to the right guy. And so that's got to be better, but you've also got to be willing to do more things, in my opinion, schematically to attack teams that we just have not seen. So yes, Sam Hartman needs to throw the football, but there needs to be more things that they do. We've seen Notre Dame in the spring ran double post concepts. We saw it hit him a big pass play of Jaden Thomas. That's gone. Haven't seen that. I understand Jaden Thomas has been out. Some other guys have been out, but I'm sorry. There's no reason not to be using that concept more often, especially with how much better the pass protection has gotten. That's a concept you need to be able to go back to. We've seen Notre Dame do some things like that. We saw them run a concept similar to that against USC for a big play. We broke it down on the Upon Further Review, where they ran I think it was a go comeback read outside, I believe is what it was. And Chris Tyree ran a post with you had a attached tight end backside, ran a corner route and went at him that way. So that's an area where you can kind of go and find an opening with that type of stuff. There's concepts you can run out of that. We've talked about this before, do more clear routes where you bring deep unders and you bring deep overs, either a 2 receiver play side where you run vertical number 2, and then you bring your normal crossers to occupy that play side linebacker who's going to drive on that, and then you bring a deep end cut behind it. There's things you can do when you're playing a man team and zone teams both. There's both things you can do effectively that can create openings in those situations. And so you need to go to that more often and use some of those concepts. Notre Dame has ran sail concepts in the spring and do things where you're clearing backside. So you're not clearing play side, but you take a backside concept, get that hard inside post release, run that over, maybe run a wheel route by number 2 with your tight end or something, and then kind of bring a little stack delay over across. We talked about when Chip Long did this back in 2019 against Virginia Tech for a big play. I see teams run that every Saturday. There's a lot of things like that Notre Dame has to be willing to do. And so if people are going to tell me, and you hear people talk about, well, we don't have the receivers to go win all the time. Okay, that's even more reason to do some of this stuff, because you've got to do more things to scheme them open. If you don't have big time receivers, then what you're doing now is like the worst thing that you can do. You're just running all vert concepts. You're asking them to win one-on-one on the outside, and then you're running a bunch of mesh stuff with guys who aren't really fast enough to scare people. Like Rico Flores is not a guy that's going to scare teams on a mesh concept. There's a lot of things Rico does well. That's not one that he really scares you. You're not going to be really concerned about, your tight ends being huge weapons, and they run it so much that teams just kind of squat on it. So, okay, so find some things that you can do off of that open things up, right? So run your meshes and maybe do a post wheel underneath it or over top of it, behind it. So those are things that you could see them do. Now, here's some things to do to be more aggressive. For the love of all things holy, can I get a double move? Can I get a double move? I mean, guys, think about this. If Clemson's playing nothing but man defense and they're squatting on your quick game, they're taking away your hitches, they're taking away your mesh, they're undercutting your Y option concepts and your slant routes and they're pick sixing it, right? Well, guys, maybe a double move or two might be something that you can see. How about a stick nod on your Y option, right? How about a sluggo? How about a slant and go? How about some kind of concept where you run a quick slide route and you got to win on the outside sometimes, right? Run a slant behind it, and then you run if they really bite that out concept, you can run a wheel. Like Notre Dame was doing stuff on 3rd and short where they're running options and then slides, and Clemson was driving hard downhill on those 3rd down concepts and just taking away those flats. So listen, if they're driving that hard downhill in man coverage to take away a slide, you know what they're going to have a really tough time defending? Flipping their hips and running vertical on a wheel concept. Hard slide, run a wheel. If they're flying outside to take away your slide route from Jeremiah Love, which they were doing, an arrow route would be great off that. Or, here's a thought, bang a double slant behind that. The middle linebacker's flying out of there. Run a double slant behind it. There's things you can do to be aggressive that can create those big play opportunities. Not every being aggressive is not always about throwing the ball 50 yards down the field. Being aggressive sometimes is saying, hey, let's take a shot on a double move here. And it seems like some of Coach Freeman's comments, like, we talked about it yesterday with Sean. He views taking a shot and it being incomplete as like somehow some horrible thing. Well, guess what? You get zeros in the run game. You don't stop running the football. If you get first time you get tackled for -1 yards on a run play and say, well, scrap that play. We're not doing that crap anymore. No. So why do you treat the pass game that way? Because there's much more reward for big plays by still sticking with that stuff in the pass game. Be willing to take chances. It's not always going to work, but you keep at it. You keep sticking with it because eventually those post plays are going to come open. Eventually you're going to find those guys open, and that's where Notre Dame needs to be. And that's what I want to see from this offense is be more aggressive, be willing to take chances. Don't be so afraid of throwing an incomplete pass or an interception that you just paralyze yourself, because now you've really taken away your offense's ability to reach its full potential. Can this offense now, with all the injuries, be as good as it could have been a month ago? No. You don't have Mitchell Evans. You don't have Jaden Thomas. You don't have Theon Colsey. You don't have Rocco Spindler. You may not have Zeke Correll. It's not going to be as good as it could have been a month ago, but it definitely can be better than it's been. There's no doubt about it. And that's what I want to see. And look, they can go out against Pitt, against Wake Forest, and hit a couple big plays and do all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, okay, because that other team's not very good. But I really want to see some aggressiveness with the play calling early. I do. I really do. And just be willing to take some chances. Number three, be more consistent with the RPO game. I don't understand Notre Dame's reluctance to be the RPO, to use the RPOs more. I really don't. I understand the need to have your receivers blocking at times. I get that. And your receivers are pretty good at blocking. For all my beefs with Chancey Stuckey this year, one thing he's done a pretty good job of is getting his receivers to block really well this season. His freshmen block well. Tobias Merriweather blocks well. A lot of the guys that we've seen play block well. That's good. And there's a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place where I want my receivers going down on the safety who's crashing, not running an RPO, because if we can get that guy blocked, I think Audric can increase the front level and go for a big play. That's totally fine. Totally get that. But there also is a need for an RPO game. And we've seen Notre Dame at times do that. I've been told in the past that Jared Parker was an RPO guy. And then we'll see it at times. We saw against Pitt, very well designed RPO game early. Just banging just to eat something simple as a fade outside with a quick out from the slot. That guy, you have leverage on your snap. If he doesn't fly out at the snap, you ride it, you pull it, and you throw it outside. Easy money. 8, 9, 10 yards. Stealing. Notre Dame did that 2-3 times against Pitt for easy 8, 9-yard completions. They ran these little play action, not play action, but they look like play action passes, but they're really RPOs where you're running an inside zone and you're having your tight end just kind of leak outside. And if they don't play it, you just pull it and you throw it 8, 9, 10, 11 yards. Marcus Freeman talks about efficiency all the time at the expense of explosiveness, in my opinion, the way that he talks about it. Well, RPO game to me makes you a much more efficient offense, because if a team is going to just bang their head, I mean, you're asking your offense to just bang their head up against the wall without numbered boxes and aggressive teams where when they see run action, here's the thing, you're not running play action pass. So when they see run action, as soon as they see run action, what are they doing? They're flying downhill because they know you're not going to do two things. You're not going to run a play action. You're not going to, and play action can be straight drop play action. It can be bootleg play action. It can be all types of different things in play action. But they know you're not throwing play action. You're not throwing RPO. So as soon as they see the O-line go downhill, as soon as they see CM Hartman turn downhill, they now know we're going. We're going. That makes it a lot harder to run the football. And so this reluctance to throw play action and to use play action, to use RPOs, to me is a little bit maddening, to be honest with you. Because, yes, they're playing man covered. So whoever's covering who. But if I can run action and I know that they're going to bite hard on my run action because we don't throw play action or use RPOs, I can get that linebacker to fly downhill, which makes that inside slant route versus man a lot more friendly to our offense. I can make that glance a lot more friendly, that quick post or the deep post. I saw Virginia Tech with their quarterback, who's a first-year starter, who didn't even start the season at quarterback as a starting quarterback, banging a post route behind their linebackers against Wake Forest on an RPO throw. So I'm to believe that Virginia Tech's got better offensive skill players than Notre Dame. That's really what you guys are going to try to tell me, because they're running RPOs. They're hitting RPOs. They're fake. They're talking about creativity. I'm watching them with double stacks, tight end tight, kind of faking a little now screen outside action. Boom, hitting a seam right up there for a big play. And so I'm seeing these type of things, and I'm not understanding why you're not going to them. Because here's the crazy thing, and here's the frustrating thing. When you have done it, they've worked really well. NC State plays a lot of man. Play action was huge against NC State. Pitt plays a lot of man. They used RPOs very effectively against Pitt. So why did they disappear against Clemson? The only thing that I can think of is you were afraid of Clemson's defense. That's it. You coached afraid of Clemson's defense. Well, I don't want to see them coach afraid of Wake Forest defense. Bring the RPO game back. It helps the run game, and it helps the pass game be a lot more efficient. And you're going to learn, do I have guys can win or not? And that's going to be the key. Number 4, move the pocket. This kind of plays a little bit of the play action game. I'm not one of those people that's obsessed over play action. You got to run 18 play action passes. I love play action. Play action is not something I would do 12 times a game. As a quarterback, play action can be dangerous, because a true play action that's going to work in Notre Dame's offense is one where I'm going to have to turn my back to the defense. And I don't always love that. There are things you can do RPO-wise. There are things you can do play action-wise, however, that are effective. And I don't know that this team, the way it's currently constructed, is going to be a great drop back play action team. I think there are some things that you can do with base play actions, either out of shotgun play actions where Sam can keep his eyes downfield, but also out of kind of drop back, out of pistol or under center shot play actions can work. But I honestly think if you're going to run play action from under center with Sam Hartman, they need to be more bootlegs and half rolls and things along those lines. RPO game, things like that. So RPO allows Sam to keep his eyes downfield, and then the other play actions allow Sam to get out of the pocket. Now, I don't know if Sam Hartman is a guy who for 5 years never turned his back on the defense really as far as play action. They were all his play actions were front-facing play actions. Now you're teaching him to turn his back and throw the ball down the field. He hasn't been good at that. I understand that. I generally understand that because that's a trait that is really new to him. And now I would have said that's why you run it a lot early and work on it early and, try to get him going for it. But let's say you did that and he just wasn't comfortable with it. That's cool. I get that. So you don't just keep doing something just because, fans tell you should run more play action. To do some things that he could be more comfortable with. And that's why I think moving the pocket is key because it limits your reads. It's not an immediate, so like a normal play action, I got to ride the play action and then I got to sell it. And then I've got to then get my eyes downfield and find the coverage. That's not always the easiest thing in the world to do. On a bootleg, however, I've got more time to get my head around and I've ISO'd my reads a little bit more. So I'm going to read the flat defender. I may read the hook curl defender, depending on what they do. If they play this way, then I know I got something coming backside. I think those are things that are a little bit more, could be a little bit more effective for Notre Dame than just pure drop back play actions. I think the pocket movement stuff, I think that's also partly, when I talk about moving the pocket, it's also like riding that outside run stuff and having a pullback play action from there. So I think those are some drop back plays I think we can see more of because they run so much of that pin and pull stuff. I think you can do some really ride that play action, then have Sam drop back so he never takes his eyes off downfield. I think he'll be more comfortable with that. Those are things that you can do if you just have some minor tweaks to your protection scheme that can allow you to maybe hit a couple big plays because you don't have to run play action 15 times. If you run it effectively 5 times, then you're going to have a chance to get some big plays and set some things up. And here's the other thing. If first time you get into a 3rd and 1 and you run a play action pass or 2nd and 1, might be a better time for it. You run a play action pass and Sam gets out the backside and either A, he's got a guy wide open, he just dumps it off to, or B, he just runs it for 15, 20 yards. What do you think is going to happen the next time that you're in the 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1 situation? It might be a little less apt to just crash off the edge, which they're doing now because you're going to boot around them. And they called that against Clemson, and it was 3 guys wide open. Then they never went back to it. And that's kind of the frustrating thing where it's like, man, you had that as part of your early script, but then once you got off the script, you went away from it and it wasn't there. So those are some things that I want to see. Moving the pocket and moving the pocket is moving it that way. It can be like a little half roll. That's what I'm referring to. Not when I say half roll, it's lack of a better phrase. I'm not talking about like a sprint out half roll. I mean, that's fine. I don't love those. I'd rather just run RPO off that to get that little quick leverage throw. I think what I'm more referring to is, again, riding that action outside a little bit with like a power read, outside power read, the gap scheme reads, the sweep reads, and then having Sam pull back from there. Those are more of what I'm referring to when it comes to moving the pocket, things that I would like to see them do to move the pocket and could fit. And then the last part for me that's very important is you need to see what you have. And I talked a little bit about this earlier, but you need to see what you have. You need to see who your receivers are. And I talked about this yesterday. I'm going to emphasize it again today. Here's why I think they need to throw the ball to Tobias Merriweather the last 2 games. Because you definitely need to know what he's made of, right? He wants the ball. He wants to play more. We all know that. Okay, well, we're going to do that now. He played well against Clemson. He did. I know you all focus on that one play on that incredibly underthrown ball where he ran the wrong route, but he can't make those mistakes. But there were other times when he was open and got to throw him the football. And here's why I say that. Challenge him. We're going to throw you the ball, not once or twice. We're going to throw you the ball 4 or 5 times. We're going to take some shots. We're going to do this because I want to see what he has. And if he goes out there and he runs the wrong routes or he doesn't attack the football or he doesn't make plays down the field, now you know. Because the reality is whenever he's gotten thrown a remotely accurate pass recently, he's made big plays. He's still averaging over 20 yards a catch. He had a really nice play against Clemson where he broke off a route on a scramble, got open for a play. See what he has. Because if he goes out there and doesn't compete for the football, doesn't battle for the football, doesn't just gets completely dominated on a 50-50 ball, guess what? Now you know. Now you know he's not it right now. He's going to have to really show me something in the spring because right now we're thinking it may be time to move on until he can make some changes. But see what he has. See what Jaden Greathouse has. Hey, Jade, man, we're going to get you back to having the football. So be more creative with how you line up. Okay, Chris Tyree and Jaden Greathouse can't both be in slots at the same time. All right, here's a thought. How about maybe you put Chris Tyree outside on a couple plays? Let him run some go routes and some clear routes, and then you can get some ISOs inside with Jaden Greathouse against the slots. Love to see something like that. Because if they don't respect Chris Tyree on the outside, you just throw the ball to him, right? So there's some things you can do. Let's see what Jaden's made of. Let's see what Jaden can do. Let's see if he can bounce back from what he's done. Outside, inside, find some concepts that Jaden's comfortable with and get him the football. See what he's made of. Again, continue to do things to get the ball into Chris Tyree's hands, pass game wise, run game wise. But right now, the folks being pass game wise. Here's the other thing. See what you have with Jeremiah Love in the pass game. We know that you can run slides and wheels because you've run a million of them. And you know who else knows you're going to run those? Every team that you faced. Let's put Jeremiah Love in the slot. You clearly don't have faith in your receivers. Let's see what he can do. Let's let him run some routes. Let him run some of those mesh concepts. Let's let him run maybe some wheel routes from more of an outside static position. Let's motion him around. Let's do some things where we use him and Audric together. Run an inside zone with a swing pass RPO concept. If that overhang doesn't want to respect Audric Estime, then you just keep hammering the inside zone right at him. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as that guy comes inside, I'm pulling and I'm throwing it outside to Jeremiah Love. Because, again, you do have good blocking receivers on the outside. That's some stuff that you can do. You've got weapons. You've got You've got to use those weapons. And those are things that I want to see. And here's the thing. If they step up, great. We've got something. Tobias didn't start off well, but he finished strong. We got some momentum with him going to the offseason. Or he doesn't step up, and now you know. Now I know. All right. Let's get that next guy going. Because we gave him a shot. He didn't step up and do it. Put Braylon James in the game for 5-10 plays. I know redshirt this. If Braylon James is who we think he is, he's not going to be here for 5 years. So I don't care about redshirting Braylon James. Okay, so he's played 3 games. You can play him one of the next 2. Fine. Play him against Wake Forest and don't worry about traveling him to Stanford or something like that. You know what I mean? But give him some chances. And if he goes out and makes plays, you don't necessarily want to redshirt him because you want to play him again the next week and you want to play him again in the bowl game. And see what he's made of. And if he's not who you think he is and he doesn't step up, just like Tobias, okay, now I know. Cam Williams, get yourself ready. Micah Gilbert, get yourself ready. Rico, get yourself ready, right? KK Smith, when you come back, get yourself ready. And now you may say, I think we do need to go to the portal because we gave these guys these opportunities. They didn't step up. And so now we know. Same thing with Cooper Flanagan. See what he's got. See what Eli Raridan's got. See what these guys are made of. See what Jadarian Price could do in a pass game. There's so many different options. Are any of them elite players? No. But when you have that many options in a 6-year senior quarterback, I don't want to hear any more excuses about why you can't do more in the pass game. I don't. I'm tired of it. There's more things you can do. There's different things you can do. Be willing to adjust and adapt. And this team has been very stubborn when it comes to that. And I'd like to see them change that. You've had the time in the bye week to get some of this new stuff in. You've had time to sit down and challenge people. I want to see them do it. So those are the 5 things for me that I want to see from the Notre Dame pass game over the next 2 games, especially against Wake Forest. Because, again, the team that you played in the last game is really bad. And it doesn't mean that what you do against them doesn't matter, because it does. But it's going to matter a little less to me just because of how bad the Stanford defense has been this year. And they lack talent. At least Wake has some NFL guys, in my opinion, in roster. But Stanford's given up 355, 393, 279, 298, 400, 282, 369, 321 in the pass game this year. They stink. So, yeah, you should do that. But to me, it doesn't matter if you don't perform well against Wake, but you do against Stanford or vice versa. I want to see it both, and it needs to start this week. Challenge guys, get them the opportunities, be willing to adjust what you're doing to fit the guys that you have, and go at it. And if they can do that these next 2 games, I'm going to be a lot happier. I know some of you won't. I know there's some people that are just, I'm done. I'm done with this guy. I'm done with that. That's fine. I mean, that you can do what you want to do. I know there's people that felt that way about Al Golden too, but maybe we see some things and say, hey, look, that's what I've been waiting on. That's what I've been waiting to see. Right now, build on it. Now go do it. Right. Stop being so conservative. Now go do it. And maybe we'll feel better. And if we don't see it, then we'll have to sit down and talk about what they need to be doing differently in a lot of different ways this off season. So that's going to do it for this part of the breakdown. Going to have part 3 coming up here in a second. We're going to talk about the transfer portal. Going to take a little quick break, get my notes ready for that part of the show. I got them ready. I just got to get some numbers, some scholarship numbers, and make sure that I'm correct on that. When we do that, then I need to catch my breath and get some hydration in me. So I'll be back in about a minute. We're going to put that up. Do me a favor, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast as well. If you listen via podcast platform, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I'll be back in a minute. While I'm gone, hope that you enjoy the Irish Breakdown theme music. All right, we are back for part 3 of this week's midweek rundown, and I'm going to talk about the transfer portal because I'm just telling you right now, this is going to be a very frustrating portal season because what's going to happen, and it happens every year, and it's going to be even worse this year, is every time there's a kid in the portal, we're going to have to listen to people talk about, oh, go after that guy. The latest is a freshman receiver at Texas A&M named Raymond Cottrell. Good player. Liked him in high school. Oh, you need to go get him. You need to go get him. Why? He had 1 catch at Texas A&M this year. How does that move the needle? Well, he's not a guy that we have. Our guys have struggled. He's got 1 catch for 13 yards as a true freshman. How does that move the needle? It doesn't. It just makes you emotionally feel better. That's not the answer. Well, go after a veteran guy. Okay, fine. Who? Okay, and my whole thing is we're going to hear every guy that's mentioned it's going to be the rumor du jour. 90+% of these are just completely bunk. Either it's just somebody giving bad intel, somebody just making stuff up, or a prospect telling people that he's looking at Notre Dame because he's going to add some schools to the list because that's a way to gain leverage. You know, there's a lot of schools that as soon as they hear Notre Dame's looking at a guy, Notre Dame's looking at that guy. Let me go look at that guy. Right. So that's just the reality. And to me, when I look at the portal, you guys have to understand Notre Dame is going to be very, very limited in the portal this year. Very limited. And we're going to have to, you're going to have to understand that they're not going to be able to go into the portal and get 1 million guys. So, number one, I'm going to go over the situation and explain to you why this is going to be a very light portal class for Notre Dame. Break that down. Then I'm going to kind of go through position by position and talk about whether or not I think this is a position that Notre Dame should look in the portal and what could be the circumstances that could lead to that. And so we'll kind of look at this kind of rationally so that you all understand what the actual portal conversation should be for Notre Dame, and understand that with as many early enrollees as Notre Dame has coming in from the 24 recruiting class, it's going to be very tough for Notre Dame to get mid-year portal guys. There's a chance the portal guys they do get are going to be more like the Antonio Carter, the Nick McLeods, post-spring portal guys, as opposed to getting guys in mid-year. So we'll break that down. To begin, when you look at Notre Dame's roster, what you all have to understand is right now, by my count, there are 99 guys that could come back near. Actually, if you want to add Andrew Kristofic, 100 guys right now that have eligibility to return next year or are part of the incoming freshman class. 100 guys. Reminder, the scholarship limit is 85. Now, when I look at the 100, there's some easy names that we can look at and chop off, right? So number one, part of the 100 that I have includes Audric Estime and Devin Ford, right? So right now you've got 3 quarterbacks on scholarship. And again, this includes freshmen. So you've got Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, and CJ Carr. Notre Dame has already said they want to go get a portal guy there. So that's one guy. That's one portal option right now that we know Notre Dame's going to look for. You look at running back. They've got 7 running backs slated to be on scholarship next year, right? Now, I don't think they're going to have 7 guys on scholarship. I think there's at least a good chance that Audric Estime goes pro, especially if he finishes the year strong. And I don't know that with Keidron Young and Aeneas Williams coming in that you're going to want to bring Devin Ford back. So let's just say hypothetically that Notre Dame makes the decision to not bring back Devin Ford, okay, and Audric Estime goes pro. So now you're down to 5 running backs. Okay, that's a healthy number. They may choose to bring back, if Audric leaves, they may choose to bring back Devin Ford. We'll talk about that at the end. But let's just say right now that they lose those 2 guys. Right now at receiver, you're slated to have 13 scholarship receivers on the roster next year. You've got Chris Tyree, Jaden Thomas, and Deion Colzier, the veterans. You've got Tobias Merriweather in the rising junior class. Plus, you have 5 freshmen. You have, obviously, Jaden Greathouse. You have Rico Flores. You have Braylon James. You have Jordan Faison, who's on scholarship now. And you have KK Smith. That's 5 freshmen rising sophomore receivers. And you're bringing in 3 more. So that's 13 wide receivers. I believe I'm doing the math correctly on that, right? So it's Tyree, Thomas, Colsey, Merriweather, plus the 9 coming in. Hold on. I think I'm missing somebody. Let me just look at this, because by that count, it should only be 12. So at receiver, you have Tyree, Colsey, Thomas, Merriweather, plus the 9. So it'd be 12. You have 12 receivers on scholarship next year. So that's 1 fewer guy. That's still at least 1 guy above. 10 is really the ideal number when you look at the wide receiver position. So Notre Dame right now is slated to have 12. Now, there's going to be some attrition. Somebody said I'm missing Salerno. Salerno is a 6th-year senior. He's not going to be back next year. So he's not. I'm not missing Salerno. He's off the roster. So there's 12 guys. Let's just say hypothetically that 2 guys leave in the offseason. Let's say hypothetically Chris Tyree decides to go the NFL or take his 5th year somewhere else. And let's say one of the veterans or one of the younger guys decides to go, right? So let's say 2 guys leave. That gets you down to 10. All right. Tight end. Right now at tight end, when you look at the depth chart, you've got currently you have 6 tight ends. Plus you're going to be adding right now you're going to be adding Jack Larson. I don't believe that they'll bring back Kevin Bauman. So I'd be shocked if they bring him back for a 5th year, but he's currently on there. So let's just say he leaves. So that leaves you with 6 tight ends. You've got 19 offensive linemen that could potentially come back. Actually, it's closer to 20. Let me just count this: 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 plus 4, 20. And that doesn't even include Michael Carmody. All right. So when you look at that list, let's say, I don't believe Andrew Kristofic is a guy that they would bring back. So let's say they don't bring him back. And let's say that Zeke Correll decides to move on to the NFL and Joe Alt goes pro. Okay, so that right there gets you down to, what would that be? 17. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 17. Yes. So you'd have 17 offensive linemen slated to come back next season. Even if you, with the 20 you have, you don't bring, all goes pro, Zeke Correll doesn't come back, and Andrew Kristofic doesn't come back. So right there, you're looking at the offense having 41 players already on the roster, not even including the portal quarterback. Defensive end, right now there's 10 guys that are slated to return or enroll. You have 7 incoming freshmen, 7 potential returners. You have to make decisions with Nana Osafo-Mensah and Jordan Botelho. Right now, I have Tyson Ford slated as an inside guy. You could easily move Tyson outside as well, count him there. But same thing, you have 10 guys right there. Let's say that between Nana and Botelho, one of them doesn't come back. That's 9. And then you look at defensive tackle. You have 10 defensive tackles coming back. Let's just say right now that you count Tyson Ford as an inside guy. Okay, and then you've got 1 incoming freshman, Sean Silviano. So that's 10. Let's just say one of Howard Cross and Riley Mills comes back. And this is just that. I mean, Notre Dame wants both of them back, but let's just say right now that just one of them comes back. And let's say they don't bring back Aiden Counta on for her 5th year, right? So that leaves them with 8. You get linebacker. You've got 11 linebackers coming back. Let's just say they only bring one of the potential 6-year seniors back between Bertrand, Kaiser, Leofow. So they just bring one of them back. Okay, you still have 9 linebackers on scholarship. You've got 10 corners, and I count Cam Hart because he has a 5th year. That's 10 corners. I don't think Cam Hart comes back. And let's just say one other guy transfers. Okay, so that takes you down to 8. Right now, you're going to have 9 safeties slated on your team next year. You have 6 returners, plus you have 3 incoming freshmen. So that's 9. Let's say that just hypothetically, let's say between Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts, one of them doesn't come back for whatever reason. Maybe Antonio Carter isn't happy. I'm just throwing out whatever. I shouldn't even say that because people are going to think I don't have any intel that that's the case, so I shouldn't have said that. But let's just say 2 guys come free. So let's say 2 scholarship spots come free at safety. So now you're down to 7. And then you have 1 special teams player in Bryce McPherson, right? I think that's a pretty liberal case. That now gets you down to 83 scholarship players. Okay, here's the thing. Notre Dame is already going to bring in a portal guy at quarterback. So that's 84. And Notre Dame is still trying to add another defensive tackle in the 2024 recruiting class. Let's say they get Amdi Agboko and they get him in the class. Now you're at 85 scholarships. Who are you taking off the roster next year to bring in all these portal guys? Who's coming off the roster? Now, there's going to be attrition, but my point is you're going to start losing some guys that you don't necessarily want to lose in order to get portal guys. You'll have, let's just say 3 to 4 additional players, 4 to 5 additional players leave. Okay, so now you've got, let's say, 5 portal positions. Now you got to think about what are your priorities in the portal. Number 1, quarterback. We've already talked about that. They need a portal quarterback. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They need a portal quarterback. Now, the question is, what type of portal quarterback? I'll make my opinion known now. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again, so we'll need to rehash it. To me, barring some stud jumping into the portal, I would like to see Notre Dame have a mind on developing the players that they have. But I also am a believer in competition, and I also believe that they need another portal quarterback to solidify the roster. If that's a guy that's starting caliber, great. If it's a guy that is more of just a depth guy, a Tristan Gebbia guy, that's also fine, but you need a portal quarterback. So that's 1. Running back, barring unforeseen circumstances that I have no intel on, running back is not a position that you're going to want to go to in the portal. That's another position you're not going to want to go to. Tight end is another position that you're not going to go to in the portal. So right now, when you look at the offensive skill positions, you are already bringing in a quarterback. You already talked about that. So you 0 tight ends. So let's say people talk about wanting to bring in a receiver. We'll just put one there for now. Offensive line, you're going to have 17 guys right now slated to come back. That does not include Zeke Correll. That does not include Andrew Kristofic. That does not include Joe Alt. That does not include Michael Carmody. So even with all those guys already taken out, there's 17 offensive linemen that you look at. I'm going to just make sure I'm going to count this one more time. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 currently coming back on the roster, plus the 4 incoming freshmen. 17 is the number. You're not bringing in, so it doesn't make sense to bring in a guy there. You're just not going to be able to have the numbers. Defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, safety. Let's look at those. Defensive end, definitely think there's a need to look for a portal guy. There's no doubt. Now, what kind of guy is that going to be that's going to be out there? I do not know. Defensive tackle, this is an interesting one. So if they lose both of Howard Cross and Riley Mills, then I think defensive tackle becomes more of a need, and you now have more room to make it happen. So when we looked at it, and I said there's 8 defensive tackles coming back, assuming that they don't bring back Aiden Canaana and one of Howard Cross or Riley Mills decides to go pro. Now there's a chance both of them come back. If they both come back, you don't need a portal defensive tackle, in my opinion. Jason Onye is going to be a senior. Gabriel Rubio is going to be a senior. Donovan Heinisch is going to go into year 2. Tyson Ford's going to be going to his junior year. Devin Houston's going to be coming off of an injury. He's going to be able to help you. You're going to bring in Sean Silviano, and there's a chance you could also add one more big defensive tackle to your 2024 class. You're good there if they both come back. If they lose one, I could see a scenario in which the staff feels if the right guy, if a Braden Fisk type player comes along, if you remember Notre Dame looking at him last year, they could go for a guy like that. If it's a 300-plus kind of thumper type of guy that just eats up space, I could look at a guy like that. But if one of those two guys leaves, I definitely think D tackle is a position to look at. If they both leave, I believe it becomes a need to at least look in the portal for a guy there. You look at linebacker, there's going to be no portal need at linebacker. It's coach the kids you have. You've got plenty of talent. You've got Jalen Sneed, Nolan Ziegler coming back. You're going to have, as we projected, one of the 6-year guys, let's just say for now, one of the 6-year guys comes back. And then you also have the freshman class of Preston Zinner, Jaden Alsbury, and Drake Bowen. Plus you're bringing in another freshman class with Kingston Viliama-Asa, Bodie Cahoon, and Teddy Rizak. So you're going to have plenty of numbers there at linebacker. You're going to have at least 9 if you only bring back one of the 6 years. If none of the 6 years come back, it does not change my answer about not looking to the portal for a linebacker. I do not think there's a need there at linebacker, especially with as much 2 linebackers Notre Dame plays. There's just not a need there. Cornerback, again, even if you lose Cam Hart and one other guy, you're still at 8 corners. Carson Hobbs, probably not a guy that I view as helping his freshman year. You're still down. That's 7. Even if you don't think Leonard Moore can play, you're still at 6. You're still going to have Benjamin Morrison. You're still going to have Clarence Lewis. As a potential nickel. You're still going to have Christian Gray. You're still going to have Jaden Mickey. You're still going to have at least one of Chance Tucker and Ryan Barnes, and you're going to have the incoming freshman. So corner's not a position where there's a need of the portal. And then safety. Safety is a position, I think, where you look at it and say there's a need in the portal for a safety. And you're going to have 7. Numbers-wise, I think you're good. Part of it depends on how comfortable are you with potentially Antonio Carter stepping into the mix next year. How comfortable are you with Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick potentially stepping into the rotation next year? And then who do you lose? If you lose Xavier Watts, now all of a sudden, to me, the safety position, if there's the right guy, becomes an even a greater priority. But that's a position that, in all reality, you're going to have a tougher time getting a guy at. We saw that last year. There were a lot of safeties that Notre Dame was linked to. And one of them visited. That's it. You didn't get any of them. And I'm not talking about Thomas Harper because he was more of a nickel. So safety is a position to potentially look at. And then you're in a situation again where you better hope you can convince a kicker to come to Notre Dame. Now, I don't believe that Spencer Schrader was on scholarship. So he's gone. You're going to have nothing but walk-on place kickers. Now, I like some of them. I do. But you're going to potentially have a need there. So at best, right now, losing all those players that we talked about, at best, you're going to have 5 slots in the portal at best right now. One of them has to be a quarterback. You might need 2 on the D-line. You're going to need one as a kicker, maybe one as a receiver. The point is you're going to have a tough time going to the portal this year for numbers. There's just not going to be a lot of space on this football team. So maybe Notre Dame can go find a receiver or a quarterback or a defensive tackle or whatever the case may be. But I'm just telling you guys, if you're thinking there's going to be this big – bring in 2 receivers. It makes no sense. you'd now have like 12 to 14 receivers on your roster. You're now forcing guys out of the program. I don't think that's where Notre Dame needs to be. I think Notre Dame needs to be like Georgia, which is 2 to 3 guys a year, find a position where there's a need. They had a need at receiver last year, so they went out and got him. But the portal is not a big part of what they do. Ohio State, same thing. They went out and got some portal guys. They had a needed cornerback. They went out and got a cornerback. They got a depth guy at defensive tackle. They went out and got a left tackle because they needed a left tackle. The vast majority of their roster is not portal guys. It's scholarship guys. And so to me, that's where Notre Dame needs to be. And I understand, I do, why some of you obsess over the portal. I really do. Because it's an easy fix. You can convince yourself that, hey, look, this guy's not good, and so we're going to go out there and replace him with somebody else. Well, that's not always the best answer. It's not even always the easiest answer. Oh, and you know what else? Somebody just said something. John Erickson. I completely forgot about Kahanu Kia, a linebacker. That's another scholarship guy that's going to take a spot. So, John, thank you for the reminder on that. Yes, Kahanu Kia comes back next year. And from what I'm told, Notre Dame absolutely plans on him coming back. So that's another linebacker, another scholarship guy that takes away from that. So to me, the numbers are going to be very limited. And while we as fans can sit there and tell ourselves to, they need to just screw this guy and bump that guy, and that's not how you build a program. That's how you make yourself feel better on social media, but that's not how you build a program. That's not how Georgia's building their program. It's not how Bama's building their program. It's not how Ohio State's building their program. It's not how Michigan's building their program. They're going to do it by finding a few guys each year to fill certain spots, just like Notre Dame did this year. I know Sam Hartman hasn't panned out. Javante Jean-Baptiste has, and Thomas Harper has. Last year, Chris Smith was a very important part of it. Spencer Schrader got off to a rough start. He's really solidified the place-kicking position. So to me, if you can plug a hole here and there, that's fine if you find the right guy. But this really comes down to developing your players. If you don't have a coach capable of getting a roster that has Chris Tyree, Deion Colsey, Jaden Thomas, Tobias Merriweather, Jaden Greathouse, Braylon James, Rico Flores, KK Smith, Jordan Faison, Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, and Logan Saldate good enough to go play really good football, then your problem is not your players. Your problem is your development. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm not saying Chancey Stuckey can't do that. But what I am saying is if you're looking at your roster right now and you're saying, we need to go find a guy that somebody else has developed, maybe the problem isn't the guys that are being developed. Maybe the problem is the guy doing the developing. Same thing on the offensive line. Same thing. And I would even argue on the defensive line. I understand that one because it's going to be a big jump between the veterans and it's like older guys and younger guys. There's like this big gap in between. And so I can understand maybe wanting to kind of bridge the gap for a year to give Boubacar or Armel Mukam and Brennan Vernon and Donovan Heinisch and your incoming freshman just one more year in the weight room. I understand that. I do. But even there, it's like coach up the guys you have. Safety position, coach up the guys you have. And so I know that it's going to make us feel better to talk about portal guys, and there's positions where portal is needed. We'll see how the roster shakes out. If there's a mass exodus at receiver like we've seen in the past, a receiver, then now the portal may be something you need to do. We can talk about that when the time comes. But right now, if Notre Dame is if this coaching staff is who I think it is and hope it is, I should probably say hope it is, then they're going to look at the roster and be like, man, I don't need a bunch of new guys. Right? I got enough competition here. I'm going to go coach the heck out of these kids. I'm going to challenge these kids, push these kids. And the guys that don't want to be pushed, they'll leave. Then we can go get the portal. But the guys that do want to be pushed, they're going to come back and they're going to be better. And that's what I want to see. And if you don't have coaches in place at these positions to develop the talent you have, then you need better coaches. It's really as simple as that. Go to the portal for coaches. That's what I would say to do. The same thing on offensive line. Yeah, you're going to be young next year. You're going to have a lot of talent. Just coach them up. Go get a one-year stopgap. That makes you feel better because it's the safer decision. But you're not winning a championship with safer decisions. You're going to win championships because you develop the players you have. And maybe that means next year you take some lumps. Maybe that means next year you go with younger linebackers and younger D linemen, and you're more inconsistent on defense. Maybe next year Your receiving core has some really great moments and some really not so great moments because they're still learning and developing. That's fine. That's fine. You take your lumps, you develop them. You're going to have a lot of games next year that you can win because you're just better than the other team. You go 9-3 again, you go 10-2 again, which will not make me happy. But if you do it the right way, I can point to it and say, this was the right move because it's going to set them up for something special in 2025 when all these young players, take your lumps with Kenny Minchie at quarterback or CJ Carr or whoever at quarterback. Because when that guy gets those 10, 12, 13 games under his belt, now you take him into the next season, 2025, and he's got that experience, you're ready to rock and roll, as opposed to getting another portal quarterback, and we're sitting here a year from now in the same spot we were before. Well, I like Kenny Minchie as a player, and I love CJ Carr, and you're going to get Deuce Knight in, but those guys don't have any experience. And, hey, we're Notre Dame. We're playing for a championship, and, we really can't go into the season with an inexperienced quarterback. At some point in time, here's a news flash, you're going to have to play a quarterback that doesn't have experience. You're going to have to play receivers that don't have experience. And it's your job, and the money that you make, making 6 and 7 figures, you're paid that money to develop those players, not let somebody else develop them and keep building your team that way. If you want to know how well that works, go ask USC how well that works. It doesn't work well. The teams competing for championship spots are teams that pick and choose little, small spots in the portal to fix their rosters, right? That's what they do. And so to me, I want to see this Notre Dame staff say, hey, you have recruited some really good players. It's time to show faith in them, to develop them, and then pick your spots here and there where you really could use a chance to bridge the gap. And for me, that's more the big boy positions where it's more about physical strength is needed. D tackle, D end, O line, maybe are some positions that you can look at if it's the right fit. But other than that, this football team is very talented. They are very talented. It's just, you got to be willing at some point in time to say, hey, yes, we're going to be young at linebacker next year. We're going to Jalen Sneed's going to make mistakes. Nolan Ziegler's going to make mistakes. Drake Bowen, Jaden Alsbury, Kingston, whoever's out there, they're going to make mistakes. I accept that. But you know what else they're going to do? They're going to make plays. Yes, Cam Williams is going to run the wrong route. He's going to drop a pass. He's going to commit a penalty that a silly freshman mistake is going to make. But you know what he's going to do? He's going to smoke some dudes if you have faith in him. That's the reality of it. And so if this coaching staff is willing to say, hey, listen, let's take our lumps next year with Charles Jagasaw in the starting lineup, knowing he's going to make some sophomore mistakes like you should have done with Billy Strouth this year. Let's take some lumps with Emil Wagner, tackle, or whoever the young guys may be. But when those 5 kids get a year under their belt, and I've got Strouth and Craig and Jagasaw and Wagner and, whoever else that you're going to play next year, man, we go into 2025. Hopefully Gearby can figure some things out. We got a chance to be really good on the offensive line. But if you keep just kicking the can down the road, then the problem never stops. You want an example? Look at Congress. Every year, keep kicking the budget down the road, and we keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And the further you get down the road, the harder it is to deal with it. And now you have to continue doing what you're doing because you have no ability to deal with it. And Notre Dame can't get there as a football team. They can't. They have to be willing to say, hey, Marcus Freeman's looking at me and say, did I hire the right staff? And if the answer is yes, then you say, then let's go coach the kids up that we have. These kids made the decision to be at Notre Dame. They wanted to be at Notre Dame. They made a decision to come play for you, Coach Freeman. They made a decision to come play for you, Coach Rudolph and Coach Parker and Coach Golden and Coach Washington and Coach Mickens, right? Coach them up. Coach them up. Show the faith in them that they showed in you to commit their futures to you. Go coach them up. And if there's a couple spots where you got to bridge the gap, then bridge the gap. Go for it. But coach them up. Build up the roster you have. And I think if they do that, this football team has a chance to be really, really good. So you can get caught up in all the internet stuff and the Twitter people that want to fire everybody and get rid of half your roster and replace them with transfers. That's fine. And that, where that works great? That works great on NCAA. Go get the old EAA stuff and kick off half your team every year and have the portal and fire coaches and do all this kind of stuff. Cool. Works great in video games. It's not real life. And you know who else isn't doing that? This is what kills me. We need to be like Georgia, be like Bama, be like Ohio State. Okay, well, they don't do that. Yeah, but but our guys aren't any good. Okay, based on what? Let's go get this other guy, this other school who has less catches than all the guys that we think suck. Explain that to me, how that makes any sense. Explain that to me. So to me, you've got talent, you've got players, coach them up. And if you don't have guys that can coach them up, find new guys that can. To me, that's the answer for Notre Dame. And if this staff is willing to do that, then I'm excited about the future. Even if it means you got to take a couple lumps next year. But hey, guys, guess what? The team we all thought was going to be a really tough early game for Notre Dame, Texas A&M, it's fired their coach. I don't know what their team is going to look like next year. But after that, you've got Miami of Ohio, Northern Illinois, Purdue, you get Louisville at home. Can't be Louisville. If you haven't recruited a roster good enough to beat Louisville at home, who just is in year one of their coach, then maybe you're not the recruiter you think you are, right? I'm sorry. You look at Florida State's going to lose a ton. USC is going to lose a ton. You're telling me you can't go beat Army? And I mean, guys, let's think about the schedule for next year for a second. They've got Northern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, Stanford, who stinks, Navy, Virginia at home. You've got Purdue on the road. Those are 6 games that flat out should be wins. You play at Georgia Tech, not even at Georgia Tech. You're playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Georgia Tech's a quality football team. They should not beat Notre Dame, a young Notre Dame team. You've got Louisville at home. You've got Texas A&M, who just fired their coach. You got Florida State at home, who's going to lose a ton of players. And you got USC, who's about to lose half their football team, including their star quarterback. If there ever is going to be a year, in my opinion, to bite the bullet and go young, it's next year. It's next year because 2025 got A&M in year 2 of their new head coach. You're going to play at Arkansas, who's going to have a new head coach. You're going to have USC that's going to have a new look roster. A lot of their young talent's going to have more experience. You play at Miami. You play NC State, who's going to be a really good football team. Pitt's going to be a better football team. And there's still a couple games you got to add, and at least one of them is going to be a really, really good football team. So to me, use next year to be the build year, and then maybe you get hot. Because here's the whole point. It's not about, you just want to sacrifice a season. No, I don't think you're going to have to do that. What I'm saying is take your lumps early and build, and then by October, November, your team starts to go. Right? That's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to see. And if Notre Dame's willing to do that, I think this team by November next year, you're like, boy, maybe we make the playoff this year, maybe we don't. But man, this team next year is going to be sick. That's what I want to see. So you won't hear me talking about every single portal guy that comes along. We'll talk about the portal quarterback because we know that that's going to be the case. But I'm not going to jump into this offseason rumor game of just for clicks and stuff about, this guy's in the portal. Maybe go get that guy. If there's legitimate guys, we'll talk about it. If Notre Dame guys leave and this changes where, hey, look, they lost 4 receivers this offseason. They're going to have to go to the portal for a veteran guy. Then we'll have that conversation because the portal is a necessary resource. If you're unwilling to look at the portal to fill certain needs that you have, then you're not using all the resources available to you to build your team. What I'm saying is in this particular instance, Notre Dame needs to be picky about who they go with the portal because of your current roster needs, but also because you have a lot of young, talented players that need you to show the faith in them that they've shown to you by coming here in the first place. And if they do that, maybe it doesn't pay off in the big way next year, but I am excited to see what that football team could be in 2025. If you give Cam Williams and Tobias Merriweather and Jaden Greathouse and Braylon James and Rico Flores and Micah Gilbert and KK Smith and Jordan Faison the opportunities to grow and learn and struggle and succeed, but develop. Give Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan that opportunity. Give Charles Jagasaw or Sullivan Absher or Sam Pendleton or whoever Gearby Lambert is the chance to see it. Let Tyson Ford and let Boubacar and Armel Mukum and Brennan Vernon and those young players, let them have the ups and downs. Let Drake Bowen make the mistakes next season because I promise you, once him and Jaden Alsbury and Nolan Ziegler and those guys get the experience and they go through the lumps and they now have the reps under their belt, they're going to be special. But if you keep kicking that can down the curb, eventually you're going to miss your opportunity because the window isn't right because now we have to go young and we're in a much tougher schedule situation than we were otherwise when we could have taken that opportunity in 2024 when the schedule really worked out perfectly for us to kind of bite the bullet and go young. And if Notre Dame's willing to do that, I think this team has a chance to really excite us at some point in time. Maybe it's sooner than I think. Maybe it's later than I think. I don't really know. but that's what I'm excited to see. And the schedule sets up perfectly for it. Now, the flip side is, well, the schedule is weaker. So go get the portal guys to maybe make a run at it next year. And that's fine. I understand that. I'm sympathetic to that. But my whole point is, I don't know that there's going to be the portal guys that are going to be that for you. And I believe most of the portal guys that Notre Dame gets they're going to be the Javonte Jean-Baptiste. They're going to be the Thomas Harpers. They're going to be the Caleb Smiths. They're not going to be Keon Coleman. If the next Keon Coleman's in the portal this year, do you really think he's going to pick Notre Dame? No, he's going to take a NIL guarantee to go somewhere else. Not coming to Notre Dame. That's not the guy you're going to go get. You're going to get the Thomas Harpers. You're going to get the Javonte Jean-Baptiste. That's your net focus needs to be. Your stars need to be homegrown. You've got potential. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Jabron Payne, Keedron Young, Aeneas Williams. You got 5 potential stars at running back. Wide receiver, loaded with talented players. They're just young. And you're going to get even better next year when those guys get older and you bring in Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert and Logan Saldate. You got loads of talent at tight end. They're just young. Develop them. You got potential first-round draft picks on your offensive line. Develop them. That's where it needs to be. And I'm looking forward to seeing that from this team. And I hope that's the route that Coach Freeman goes. I really do. I really do. And I know that that's not going to be liked by social media people. That's fine. It's all good. People can have difference of opinion on this. But for me, this is the best way for me, in my opinion, for Notre Dame to build. So that's going to do it for that. I did have a super chat here real quick from Michael S. before we wrap up. Michael says, because Parker's a new OC, is he reluctant to push against Freeman's non-aggressive approach? Wouldn't a more experienced OC be more definitive in what he wants to do? I have no idea. I can't answer that. Maybe. And maybe in year 2, maybe Jared Parker felt because of the circumstances of his hiring that he had to kind of just go with the flow this year and get his feet wet and then take more charge next year. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Jared Parker's the issue. I don't know. Maybe Marcus Freeman's the problem. I honestly don't know the answer to that. All I can tell you guys is what I see and what the issues are and what they can do to fix it. I don't know what got them here. I'm not at practice every day. But I can tell you that's a problem. I can tell you why it's a problem. I can't tell you who's responsible for it. But what I can tell you is he's the OC. He needs to fix it. I think Jared Parker's a smart guy. And I've had some conversations with different people and in my own experiences with him and things like that. I think he's a smart guy. Doesn't mean you're a great offensive coordinator. I think he's capable of fixing it. I don't know if he's going to get the chance to do so. I don't know if he's willing to take the risks to do so. I don't know the answer to that. But I just know that they need to get fixed. At this point, I don't even really care how they get fixed. I just know they need to get fixed. And the blame game is fine. We can do that. But at the end of the day, Michael and you and I don't really know the ins and outs of it. He hasn't been here long enough to where I can say, yeah, I've seen enough. I've heard enough. This needs to get fixed. All I know is we see the issues because they're obvious every Saturday. I've offered some solutions. Hopefully Coach Parker sees it the way that I see it, and he goes out and makes the changes, because the couple times this year that they have taken the things we've talked about, it's worked out pretty well. And hopefully that happens again here against Wake Forest in this offense. Because the biggest thing this group needs is a confidence boost. And to me, the biggest way to give players a confidence boost is to show confidence in them. When you show confidence in them, then they have more confidence in themselves. I learned that. I learned that very early on in my coaching career. Hey, you want that kid to believe in himself, then you believe in him. Because if you don't believe in him, he's not going to believe in himself. And I think that you've got to coach that way. And I don't know that that's always happening on offense. And I'm not saying that's just because of Jared Parker or even because of Jared Parker at all. But that's something he can control now moving forward. And I want to see him do it. And if he does, it could be fun. If he doesn't, we'll see more of the same. So anyway, folks, that's going to do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow. Ryan and I'll be back tomorrow at 1:00. We're going to have our keys to victory breakdown and our predictions breakdown. I've been talking to Ryan today. He's going to have his recruiting show on Friday. Got some big time guests lined up for Friday. We're going to have some recruits on the show. Some really excited about it. I'm not going to spoil the surprise. I'm going to let Ryan tell you guys about that, or he may just decide to just kind of tell you who's going to be on the show when they're on. But it's going to be a lot of fun. Going to be some really, really interesting conversation going on Friday in the recruiting show. And then, of course, Saturday after the game, Vince and I will have our post-game show. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely join us for that. make sure you hit that like button, folks. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, not just physically share, click share, but also tell your friends who are Notre Dame fans to check it out as well. And, sign up for the message board. We got a lot going on. We're working through some technical kinks right now. We're dealing with some speed issues, but I promise you we're on it. We're going to get it fixed. We had to deal with this a couple years ago, and when we finally figured it out, it was rocking and rolling. We will get it figured out. Just be patient with us. We would appreciate just a little bit of patience on it. I promise you, we are going to get it fixed. It's not going to stay like this forever, but the intel to me and the discussion and the people in the community is worth it. So definitely sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thanks for being with me today, and I'll talk to all of you again soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.